the top Democrat on the Foreign Relations Committee, is joining us live. Senator, thanks so much for joining us.
Good to be with you, Wolf.
Let's start with the news that the White House granted top secret security clearances to about 25 people who were initially denied those clearances. What are the potential national security concerns that you may have?
Well, there's a reason that people go through a vetting process as it relates to national security clearances. And while the president may have the power to overrule those who did the vetting, it doesn't mean that he should do so. These are individuals who obviously, from the reports, did not pass certain clearances, either because of possibly a criminal record, possibly financial entanglements, possibly foreign influence, a lot about which has gone on with this administration. So you want to make sure that the national interest and security of the United States is insulated from all of that, which is why if you don't meet the threshold, you are denied. And the president overrules them arbitrarily and capriciously. So you have to question, how seriously does he take the national security questions that flow from the security clearances and the vetting that goes through it?
One of those 25 officials is apparently Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law, senior advisor, who has taken the lead on several sensitive national security foreign policy issues, including the Israeli-Palestinian peace process, relations with Mexico, the relationship with Saudi Arabia, among other countries. Does your committee know the extent of the issues behind Jared Kushner's security clearance and how that might impact his work?
Well, we don't fully know the issues behind his particular security clearance and the override that the president put on granting him security clearances, but he is engaged in some of the most significant foreign policy, national security questions of our country. And so knowing, for example, I don't know what the specifics are, but knowing, for example, is foreign influence a concern as it relates to Mr. Kushner? Because if it is, then you have to worry about how that foreign influence affects his counsel to the president and the actions that he has taken in pursuit of U.S. national foreign policy. And so it's just one dimension of a really dangerous and concerning set of circumstances in which you cannot decipher what's in the national interest, what somebody's doing purely in the national interest, or what are they doing in their personal interest.
You've been among those lawmakers pushing for accountability in the death of the Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Now an investigator for Jeff Bezos, who owns the Washington Post, is writing in the Daily Beast, and let me quote from that article. This was apparently, this is the article. Our investigators and several experts concluded with high confidence that the Saudis had access to Bezos's phone and gained private information. So what do you think? Apparently this was in response to the Washington Post's very tough coverage of Saudi Arabia. Does this line up with your own understanding, first of all, of Saudi capabilities? Is this something your committee is concerned about?
Well, certainly my committee is concerned about, on foreign relations, any influence by foreign power, foreign government, a foreign individual in trying to affect the dialogue, the politics, and the policy of the United States. And so if this report is true, then the Saudis trying to affect Mr. Bezos because he owns the Washington Post, and therefore trying to affect the Washington Post's free editorial line in terms of their freedom of the press to pursue whatever editorial line they want, including being critical of the Saudis, or to pursue the work of journalists to try to freeze them or discredit them by virtue of their owner, is something that would be hugely problematic. Interference in our own efforts in terms of our policy as it relates to the U.S.-Saudi relationship. And another example that the Saudis, if true, think that they can do anything with impunity.
Let's turn to the results of the Russia investigation by Robert Mueller. Do you support the House Democratic effort that's underway right now to subpoena the full unredacted Mueller report, even though the Attorney General Bill Barr has promised a redacted version by mid-April?
Well, look, I think that at least in the context of congressional oversight, there should be a full vetting of the Mueller report, and they should get full access. They know as members those elements, for example, if there are national security elements in there, they know that that cannot be disclosed in terms of sources, methods of acquiring information. But at some point, after 2 years and millions of dollars spent, and when we're talking about critical issues, both in terms of domestic and foreign policy, it seems to me that a full vetting of the Mueller report should take place, and that the total publication of it, to the extent possible, beyond Congress for the American people, should be realized as well.
Amidst all of this, Senator, President Trump is turning his attention to immigration. He's threatening to shut down the entire southern border with Mexico. Is this a negotiating tactic, or do you think the president will actually follow through with that threat?
Well, you know, the president lives in a parallel alternate universe as it comes to immigration, as it relates to the U.S.-Mexico relationship. I guess he doesn't understand that Mexico is the second largest market for American goods and services in the world, not in the hemisphere, in the world. So you want to close the border down, you want to close all the ports of entry, you're going to have an enormous consequence to commerce, to agriculture, and a whole host of other things that are critical to our own interests beyond Mexico's interests, number one. Number two is you want to deny Central American countries the money that don't go to those countries. They for the most part, go to non-governmental entities that are trying to create a structure in those countries on rule of law, on public safety, on hunger, so that we don't have people fleeing from those countries. Well, Mr. President, all you're going to do is drive more people to the border. And lastly, if you didn't create a set of circumstances in which you're violating our asylum laws, in which an individual seeks to be processed at a border entry, can be ultimately known who they are, what they're seeking asylum, and then vetted for asylum, you wouldn't have them crossing illegally. But you're stopping them from doing what is legal under our country, which is to seek asylum at a border crossing. So the president is a big part of creating the challenge that we have in the border by his policies.
Senator Menendez, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.